Good afternoon, everyone. John Rockefeller once said, "Good leadership consists of showing average people how to do the work of superior people." Today, amongst us, we have one such leader, Mr. Rajiv Bajaj, the Managing Director, CEO, and Executive Director of Bajaj Auto. Mr. Bajaj joined Bajaj Auto as an officer on special duty in December 1990 and later served as Vice President of Products from July 95. He obtained extensive on-the-job experience at Bajaj Auto and has been leading a major technological and marketing reorientation for over a decade. He has been spearheading Bajaj Auto's transition from a scooter and three-wheeler manufacturer to a dominant force in the motorcycle segment, and is credited with setting up Bajaj Auto's ultra-modern plant at Chakan near Pune. He was also the first to introduce the concept of financial planning in India. Mr. Bajaj has played a pivotal role in revamping the supply chain and the marketing setup in Bajaj Auto, and has introduced several innovative strategies to provide a cutting edge. Mr. Bajaj is also the founder chairman of the Association of Financial Planners and is one of the first 25 certified financial planners in India. Mr. Bajaj is a Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering First Class from the University of Pune and a Master of Science in Manufacturing Systems Engineering from Warwick in the UK. He has an MBA from Harvard and has also pursued an executive MBA. He was the recipient of several business awards in the year 2011. Mr. Bajaj is an engineer at heart. However, he also draws insights from yoga and homeopathy. He writes poetry and is quite humorous, as was evident from the discussions we had right now with him, as well as from his Twitter handle, @MotorcycleYogi. I would like to thank Mr. Bajaj for taking time out of his very busy schedule and especially flying in from Pune today to speak to all of us. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Mr. Bajaj on stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ishan, and thank you all for your invitation. Ishan, your introduction was very kind, and usually one is modest about it, but in this case, I will thank you for it, because when I look at the faces of your friends, it seems to suggest they are wondering, who's this guy in the t-shirt in front of us today? So perhaps this formal introduction was required. I know that I'm at a very wonderful institution. I have heard it is very difficult to get access to this place as a student. So I believe you're all very fortunate and privileged. I think it is very difficult to get access to it as a speaker also. So I feel equally privileged to be here with all of you. I said to myself when Ishan spoke to me and requested me to come and speak to you, that I would like to speak to you less about myself and my company and more about something that's a little more generic, in the hope that it will add some value to you and prove to be of some use to you in your thought process over the next few years. And as I struggled with that, I happened to speak with Elena, and she said, maybe you should talk about how things go wrong sometimes, why we fail, what we can learn from that, how we can make wiser and better choices. And so that's why that's the subject of my talk today. Will you put it up, Isha? It says, deciphering failure and therefore decoding success. I have had so many occasions of failures that nobody is better qualified to talk to you about this than me. That's why I'm here to speak on this subject. I've been at Bajaj for about 20 years now. Let me tell you very quickly, as an introduction, what it is that I've been doing there. The first 5 years, from 1990 until 1995, I spent working in the manufacturing area. I did that partly because I'm a manufacturing engineer, and partly because when I joined the company, as hard as it may be for you guys to believe, there was still a 18-month waiting period for the scooters that Bajaj used to make. When I was in school, much like you, that waiting period was 10 years long. I was my teacher's favorite because I could get them a scooter out of line and do them a little favor. They didn't have to wait 10 years to get the scooter they wanted. So that's what I did for the first 5 years. The next 5 years, 95 to 2000, I spent developing products, setting up an R&D. Because by 95 I realized Bajaj was getting very good at what it made, but people weren't interested in buying what it made. So that brought me to the need for R&D, for product development. And that's what I did until 2000. In 2000, it began to occur to me, we are good at making stuff, we are good at developing stuff, but people don't seem to want to buy what we are good at making and developing. And I turned my attention at marketing and sales, both for the domestic as well as the export markets. And that's what I did till 2005. And then I thought I had it all stitched up, manufacturing, R&D, marketing, all of it. But when India, along with the rest of the world, landed in a bit of a problem starting 2007, 2008, the bottom just fell out of our company. And it made me really sit back and reflect on what could have gone wrong. After 15, 17 years of working bottom up in all the important functions, we were still in all sorts of trouble. That seemed to suggest to me that perhaps we had just worked on things superficially and not gone deep enough in our thought and action. And in this process, nothing helped me more than the science of homeopathy. So I will take 5 minutes of your time this morning over the next 2 slides to tell you a little bit about the fundamental thought process that lies behind homeopathy. So let's start with that. A great homeopath called Dr. Herring said, we live in 2 worlds, the world of result and the world of cause. And most often, my friends, what I find is, whether in our personal lives or in our corporate life, we find it difficult to distinguish between what is the result of something and what is the cause of something. I have seen a lot of people behave as if an expensive suit can be the cause of success, whereas in reality, an expensive suit is the result of success. I see a lot of my competition advertise and advertise more, as if advertisement is the cause of success. Whereas if you pause and think, it would occur to you that advertising or the luxury of advertising is only the result of success. It's a successful entrepreneur who has the money to advertise. You don't start advertising the day you start a business. So let's start with the result we're all looking for in our personal and corporate lives. We are looking for wellness, for good health. Nothing matters more to us than our health and that of our companies, the companies we manage. The concept of wellness leads us to the concept of disease, or as in homeopathy, it is referred to as dis-ease, the absence of ease. Problems start for wellness when there is the presence of stress or the absence of ease, and that's why it's called disease. We know disease through symptoms actually. Often somebody will say, I have a cholesterol problem. Sometimes forgetting to distinguish that cholesterol is only the symptom and not the disease. I have asthma. Asthma is not a disease. Asthma is only a symptom. That leads us to the concept of cause. What causes a certain symptom? For example, I get sunburnt whenever I'm in the sun. So my son, who's 14, his favorite destination is a beach place. And he knows well that after the first or second day, his father will be completely sunburnt. And I will then spend the rest of the holiday in the hotel room with the curtains down because I cannot even stand the indirect light. This made me think initially that the cause of my symptom was the sun. Not my sun, the sun as in the star sun, S-U-N. धूप की वजह से मुझे sunburn होता है. This is what I thought. But then homeopathy helped me ask the question, why me? Why does my son not get sunburnt? Why does my wife not get sunburnt? Why don't other people get sunburnt? Why only me? This helped me understand the concept of what is called an exogenous cause. An exogenous cause or an exciting cause is one that lies on the outside. And it is the same for everyone. So whether it's a poor economic situation in the country, that is true for all companies that operate in the company. Whether it's the sun on the outside, the bacteria, the virus, it's the same for all the human beings that exist in that place. And this led me to the concept of what is known in homeopathy as the fundamental cause. The fundamental cause is the cause that lies inside of us. It is the endogenous cause, or as is often referred to in management theory, the root cause. So not the exogenous or the exciting cause, but the root cause that lies inside of us. Why is it in an aviation sector, I'm sure you're studying this in your business lectures, where every airline is in trouble, why does an airline like Indigo do so well? Why is it when the Indian IT sector is tapering off, TCS goes from strength to strength? Why is it in an auto sector, which is in all sorts of trouble, a company like Mahindra Mahindra does so well? In the same inimical external conditions that affect 80-90% of us, why do 10% of us continue to excel? There must be something inside those 10% that helps them to do this. Next, please, Ishan. From fundamental cause, we move to the concept of constitution. Everything and everyone has a constitution, be it a country, a school, or even a human body. In business language, maybe your professor refers to it as a business model. This is management jargon, business model. But effectively, it means that a business also has a constitution. And the constitution of the business defines its individuality. We say we are individuals. And what makes us individuals is not what we have in common with each other. It is what we have in uncommon with each other. The fact that we all have hair, we have in common with each other, at least most of it. And how we wear our hair is very, very individualistic. So what makes us who we are is what we have in uncommon. And that which we have in uncommon as people or as organizations defines our susceptibility. This is a very, very key word, susceptibility, that I understood in the process of studying homeopathy. In other words, predisposition or vulnerability. You only fall prey to that which you are predisposed to. This any doctor will tell you, whether he is a homeopath or an allopath or a naturopath. Pune, for the last 4 years, which is where I live, has been the swine flu capital of the country. But everyone doesn't fall ill and take to swine flu at the same time. It is only those who on that day are predisposed or vulnerable to it, are susceptible to it, who have that in their constitution, who take ill, and not anyone else. The opposite of susceptibility is vitality, immunity. You must have heard this word immunity or immune system in the course of your studies. Resistance, the ability to resist, which is embedded in our immune system. And let me finish this little introduction of homeopathy by saying, every doctor will tell you there exists something in us that is called the immune system, in which all our health resides as human beings, as living creatures. And yet, there is no blood report that validates the presence of the immune system. It is not something that the surgeon can demonstrate to you on the operating table. It is not something that can be X-rayed, MRI, or CT scanned. It is not like a physical organ of the body. The immune system exists within us as a form of energy. And the point of putting you through this long discourse of homeopathy is this, that my realization was what the immune system is as the vital energy in a human being, strategy is to an organization. Your school has a strategy, but I cannot see it. I can see its physical resources, I can see the students, the faculty, the buildings, the other equipment, but I cannot see the strategy, but it exists. And the reason the school is an excellent school is first and foremost because it has in place an excellent strategy. So it occurred to me that while I might have done everything right at Bajaj, hopefully, but perhaps something was missing, something was not quite as adequate as it should be in terms of the strategy that we had in place in Bajaj. And that is what we turned our attention to in the last 5 years. That is what has paid us rich dividends. In the last 5 years, we've gone from being in serious trouble to being the third largest motorcycle maker in the world, to being the largest three-wheeler maker in the world, and to being the most profitable automaker in the world. And when I say profitable automaker, it's not only amongst two-wheelers. Whether it's two-wheelers, four-wheelers, cars or trucks, nobody returns the kind of margin that we have for the last 16 quarters. And at least personally, I would say first and foremost, not only, but first and foremost, I give credit for that to what we learned from homeopathy. Now let's move away from this gobbledygook of homeopathy and talk a little business. So as someone said, before we start with the process of possibilities, we must begin with the purity of principles. And that's one thing I would like to say to you today, that when you apply your mind to the choices you need to make, don't make them based on superficial possibilities. Think deeply, reflect deeply upon whatever it is that lies before you, and try to address that with a principle that will always stand you in good stead, not only for the next 6 months, but for the next 60 years. Let me present you with one such principle. Next, please. Again from Al Ries, who goes on to explain why 90% of new products and services fail. He says because they were introduced to serve a market rather than to create a market. We made the same mistake for a long time. When I joined the company in the early 90s, we were faced with a situation where somebody else was the market leader with motorcycles, a company called Hero Honda. They were very popular for their extremely fuel-efficient motorcycles, generally referred to as 100cc motorcycles. And we thought to ourselves, very intuitively, that the very obvious thing for us to do was to also make something similar. And this is the marketing mistake that most of us make, and which is why we fail 90% of the time. Because we think that in order to get a slice of the pie that's out there in the marketplace, we must also go and do what the market leader is doing. What do we end up doing? All we end up doing is endorsing the market leader. All that Bajaj did through the 1990s was to imply to intending customers that Hero's doing the right thing because we are going to ape them as well. So perhaps you should go and buy their motorcycle because after all, they pioneered it, they were the original. What is important is to be contra-intuitive, to go against the tide, to go against the grain, to be different. But that takes a lot of courage. Now here's how we went about what we did in the last 10 years or so. We chose, as opposed to the strategy of familiarity, if I may call it that, a strategy of differentiation. The strategy of familiarity rests on the principle that familiarity breeds desire. Whereas I'm sure you've all understood by now that familiarity only breeds contempt. It doesn't breed desire. What breeds desire is novelty. And so to be able to stand out in contrast to what is the norm is the way to differentiate oneself in the marketplace. I remember a fabulous campaign that was run by BMW cars in the US. Mercedes was already a market leader. BMW was late in entering the market. They had to differentiate themselves, although they were also simply another luxury car in the marketplace. And they ran a wonderful campaign that said, BMW is the ultimate driving machine and Mercedes is the ultimate sitting machine. And by so positioning themselves or repositioning Mercedes, BMW differentiated itself in the marketplace. We did something similar. After failing for 12 years in trying to make yet another 100cc mileage motorcycle to compete with Hero, we said to ourselves, forget about that market, we are going to do it differently. For those who want a mileage motorcycle, there is already someone there making some. We will make something that is not like that. We will make something that is the exact opposite of that. And I still remember when this was proposed within the company, both to the board and also to the senior management, there were clearly two schools of thought. Some of us liked the idea, and a lot of people thought that this was a bit too risky for the company at that stage. When we had not been successful in making and selling something that people were generally predisposed to, how would we manage to pull off something for which the market was not apparently ready? But we went ahead and did it. We created a bike called the Pulsar. And for this motorcycle, we set up a new plant that Ishan referred to, because we thought it was so far ahead of its time technically that our existing plants would not be able to do justice to the manufacturing process. So Pulsar, as the new product made out of a new plant at Chakan, was the turning point of the company in 2001. Since then, we've gone on to understand that for any marketing problem, there are 4 fundamental strategies that can be employed very successfully. Not 3, not 5, 4. And that's what we've done over the last few years. And on one slide, I'd like to share those with you. Next, please. This is how we repositioned ourselves. Let me take you through it. Let's start with the top left quadrant. And I give you the analogy of the soft drink or the cola industry, so that makes it very simple to understand. Coke is the leader of the cola industry. All that Coke has to do is to raise the bar and defend its leadership. I just told you, Bajaj is the leader of the three-wheeler market. All we need to do for that market is to raise the bar and defend our leadership. So the question before us a few years back was, how do we raise the bar with three-wheelers? Lots of people use the three-wheeler, but most people have a very iffy opinion about the three-wheeler, for more than one reason perhaps. And so we said to ourselves that perhaps the best three-wheeler is actually a four-wheeler. If Gillette can defend its leadership by putting 4 blades onto the razor in place of 3, maybe we should put 4 wheels on the vehicle instead of 3. That is the strategy of defense, and it is a strategy to be employed when one is fortunate to be the market leader. If we move to the top right quadrant, here's an example of our motorcycle, the Pulsar, that I was just describing earlier. In the motorcycle market, we were not the leader. We could not employ the strategy of defense. We employed what is called the strategy of offense, be the opposite of the leader. 7-Up is the opposite of Coke, because Coke is black and 7-Up is transparent or white. It's not black. And that makes parents like us think 7-Up is better for the kids than Coke is. That's how 7-Up creates a market for itself by presenting itself as the opposite of Coke. We made a motorcycle called the Pulsar, effectively telling people, if you just want a high mileage motorcycle to take you from point A to point B, please go ahead and buy the Hero Honda motorcycle. But if you want a groovy, sexy, sporty, fast, powerful motorcycle, which will have the girls looking at you, then maybe you should buy the Pulsar. So that's called the strategy of offense, the strategy of opposites. Below the Pulsar is what we call the strategy of flanking. Sometimes in a marketplace, as we found out in some of our international markets, there is already a leader, there is already someone who's the opposite of the leader. And yet, if one wishes to do business there, one can employ the strategy of flanking, i.e. of Pepsi, which is, I am a cola, but I'm not a better cola, I'm a different cola. And this is very important, because at least as engineers, our left brain is 3 times the size of our right brain. We think if we make a better product, people will buy it. But people don't buy better. People buy different. And there is a difference between better and different. For example, in the case of Pepsi, they would not have been able to pull this off if Pepsi had not been clearly younger, i.e. sweeter than Coke. The sweetness of Pepsi is its credibility. And its strategy rests on that. And from that derives all its communication. So we made a motorcycle that was not a sports motorcycle. It's called the Discover. It's a commuting motorcycle, but with a lot more style, a lot more features, a lot more performance. And that's how we carved another niche for ourselves in the marketplace. And finally, if all these positions are taken, there is still the option of being a gorilla in the marketplace. You've all heard of Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson doesn't try to be a Hero or a Honda or a Bajaj or a Yamaha or a TVS. It has a little niche to itself, and it does very well in that niche. Our homegrown example is that of Royal Enfield that makes the Bullet. Yeah? Very, very, very popular motorcycle. It's not high tech, but it's a great marketing success because Siddharth Lal understands guerrilla strategy very well. So these are the 4 strategies that we employed at Bajaj. In the process of redoing our strategy, rebranding ourselves, we are now a company that makes the RE, the Pulsar, the Discover, and the KTM, and not just a one-size-fits-all scooter or motorcycle. Take you to the last 2 slides. So what is the job of the CEO then, as I've understood at the end of 20 years? Again, I will lean on Mr. Rees because he says it best. The job of the CEO is to find the future in the current activities. Once you differentiate yourself and create a niche for yourself in the marketplace, stay with that niche and expand from there. Too often the mistake that we then make after first success is to disengage from that center, from that niche, and try to do something that's discontinuous with it. Or try to extend our success into unrelated areas. If it's not clear, I'll make it clear with an example that everybody will agree with, I think. Kingfisher. Great success in the beverages or alcohol business. No business to get into the aviation business. And look what happens. So it's important to stay within the boundaries of your success, within the framework that created it, within that Lakshman Rekha, because that's where you are safe. Otherwise, when you step out, there is always some Ravan waiting to carry you away to Lanka. So, I have learned through many personal errors, failures, mistakes, that sometimes the greatest enemy of strategy is creativity. The need to do something unrelated, discontinuous, disruptive, as opposed to simply adapting and evolving. And to put in place a strategy which helps us to differentiate in the first place, and then to evolve from there and expand from there our business. I think that is what strategy is about. That is what the dharma of our organization is about. To create one Pulsar, and from that a Discover or a KTM or a 4-wheeler, but all that which is connected to what made us successful in the first place. I think that is the dharma of Bajaj that makes it successful. And on that note, I take you back to a little bit of old wisdom finally, that comes from the Mahabharata. It says, although the king is invested with authority and power, true sovereignty belongs to dharma, not the king. It is not any one person who can, it is impossible, who can ensure success. It doesn't matter whether as principal or whether as managing director or in any other capacity. It is the strategy that we put in place. It is the immunity we impart to our organization. It's the dharma we install by which we work that ensures that we remain vital. So if there were a few things I wanted to leave you with today, it was this. From failure, we can go to success. If we go from the world of results to the world of cause, if we can go from possibilities to principles, if we can think about differentiation, that specializes us, because that specialization will answer the most important question that we need to answer in our lives, which is, who am I? There is a great American yogi who lives in Dalhousie in the Himalayas who told me this one day. He said, all questions will be answered when you can answer the question, who am I? I found my answer when I could answer the question simply in this way, I am a motorcycle specialist. Then I know exactly what I am supposed to do and exactly what I am not supposed to do. I hope in some such way you find your specialization, your differentiation, your dharma, and you all do well and find your wellness in life. Thank you once again for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bajaj. A head boy, head girl, this is a small token of appreciation from us, and we really appreciate you taking our time, flying from Pune to here to talk to us. And, I think it was such a wonderful speech, so precisely spoken about. One of the things that all our students who come back from universities share with me and Mr. Keegan, that one of the things they feel that they need to learn more is how to succeed from failure. Because failure is a part of life. It's not always success.
Sure.
So once you fail, how do you know what's the problem and how do you get out of that? I'm so glad that I'd share it with Mrs. Meswani one of these days, and you really addressed what many of our students are coming and sharing with us. But, to all of you here, I think if you have heard him and Leander this morning, you know that one of the greatest qualities of being successful is also taking measurable risks, being a risk taker. Risk taker is not sort of walking, on the main road where there is high traffic going right and left. But, what he shared the story of moving from being Hamara Bajaj to Mera Bajaj, I think it's a transition of a company, and it's a lesson in whichever way you take it forward. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.